Hello, this is Teresa Nichols, and I am reading out of The Story of Teresa. And I'm on page 68, and these are the miracle stories in chapter 4. And this one is called The Left Lane. One day I was driving in the next to the left-hand lane, about to go up a hill on a busy interstate in Houston, Texas. I had a simple thought. A quick thought suggested that there could be a stalled truck in that lane, and I would have no place to pull over and to avoid hitting it. The thought was so simple, not urging, just a thought that made sense. I instantly looked around and veered into the far left lane. As soon as I topped the hill, there was a stalled truck in the next to the left-hand lane. I watched the young man on the motorcycle smash into the back of the truck. He did not have any place to go. I was beside him. I pulled over far enough to let him in next to me, but I could not get him to look at me, and I will never forget his white knuckles as he clenched the handlebars. He was frozen with fear as he crashed into the back of that truck. I remember crying and shaking, and I remember asking God if that man had the same thought I did and just did not take the action, or was it his time to die that day? I did not know. I still do not know, but I'll never forget it. I did not know why I was spared. This type of protection has happened to me many times since this first experience. I pray for protection over me and my car whenever I go on a trip, and I feel totally safe. If I have a feeling about something or some lane or where to stop or when to stop, I obey that voice in me. It is there for a reason. I still do not know why some die in the simplest car wrecks and others live through the most devastating ones. These are things only God knows. This next one is called Hamburgers by Gourmet. I remember this one. Oh my, this was, I think, in the late 1970s, I think. It was Wednesday. I had worked hard all day at Gulf Coast Investment Corporation in Houston, Texas. I went home and rested and began to get ready to go to church. So it would have been a Wednesday night. As I started driving to church, I had an enormous urge to eat a hamburger at Hamburgers by Gourmet. Well, Hamburgers by Gourmet was clear across town. If I drove there, I would miss church. And I was faithful to church during that period of time in my life. Besides, I'd already put on my pantyhose. But the craving was so strong. My mouth began to water, and I actually yearned for that burger. I turned my car around and headed toward my burger, singing praises to Jesus all along the way. When I drove up to the drive-in window, I had the strongest urge for a beer. I ordered the beer with the burger and was told I had to come inside for the beer. By the way, I don't drink beer, don't even like the taste of it. I don't think I'd ever even drunk a beer at that time. But again, it just felt like normal. So I pulled in and went inside to order the beer and the burger. I sat down, and there she was. She was a young woman deep in thought. She was staring out the window with a frown on her face. She did not look like she wanted to be disturbed. I certainly did not want to disturb her. I had a strong feeling come over me to go and sit with her. I did not want to go sit with her. The feeling grew, and I kept resisting. The more I resisted, the sicker I became. Minutes seemed like hours as I fought the whatever it was feeling. Finally, I began to have chest pains. It felt like I was going to die. I literally could not breathe because the pain became so intense. I know now what I didn't know then. I got up, I walked over to the woman who did not want to be disturbed, and I stood at her table. And she looked away from the window for a moment, and she just stared at me. I stood there as awkward as you look when you are standing next to someone's table who does not want to be disturbed. And I said, "May I sit here?" She shrugged her shoulders and began looking out the window again. And I sat down, and there I was, and there she was, and there we were, silent for a while. Finally, I said, "Look, God has sent me to you. Are you in trouble? Do you need do you need any help? What can I do for you? I sat there absolutely stunned while I watched her face begin to crack, and I watched a tear fall down, then another, then a flood of tears just was falling down her face. I honestly do not remember all of our conversation that day, but she had her bags packed and was leaving there to go join some kind of cult. And I felt her grandmother had prayed for her, and I asked her to try God first. That was my first God encounter of being used by God to go and help another that I know of. God uses us all the time. It would have been good to know that that's what it was at the time, but I had never experienced anything like that, and neither had anyone I had ever known. By the way, I never drank the beer. I don't drink beer. I don't like beer. I never ate the burger. I really wasn't hungry. I still think on the odd tools of God, and they just felt so natural to me at the time. I have never cared about any one kind of a burger ever. Still don't. Just that one time. You can go through life unaware of the details of God, and God will still do all He does for you. But I assure you, it is so much more fun when you're aware of the aha moments. God loves to surprise you. Enjoy Him. He is wonderful. I'm going to come back and, well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and finish chapter 4. We only have one more miracle, and then we'll take a break and start chapter 5. I'm almost through with the book. This one is Allison's ultrasound. We all gathered around my daughter Allison when she was having her 3D ultrasound in Tallahassee, Florida. All were standing around in the little examination room waiting for this big event. So this would have been almost 18 years ago. We were all so excited to see our grandchild. Little Stephen, however, was not as anxious to show us who he was. He had his back to us and would not turn around to introduce himself, and after a lengthy wait, the men all had to go back to work, and I had to fly back to Tennessee that afternoon. The doctor suggested that Allison drink a Coca-Cola and walk around the parking lot. We women, her stepmom, her mother-in-law, and me, her mom, walked her around the parking lot while she drank the Coke. Then we went back in to see if little Stephen would accommodate us with his face. He not only faced us, but it looked like he waved at us. Tears immediately broke out. Stepmom Joanne passed out the Kleenexes while we marveled at our great miracle from God. It was a most memorial day, most memorable day for all of us. It was so cool. As we were crying and laughing, everything went in slow motion. For me, it was like I was on the outside looking in a slow motion video. I'll never forget it. And I heard the voice of God say, "They will take good care of him." I said yes to God and cried more. God promised me He would take very good care of them as I leave to return to Tennessee. God has been faithful as usual. Allison's mother-in-law, Susan, had a heart problem and went to the emergency room. After tests were run, they found that she had a blockage and was going to need stents put in her heart. I cried out to God, and I reminded Him of His promise to me. He told me they would take very good care of my grandchildren. I told God that I did not want her to have surgery. I wanted her to have a good heart. I didn't want her to suffer at all because she is wonderful to our grandsons. I heard God say, "Do you trust me?" I said, "Yes, sir." I then picked up the phone and I called my daughter and I told her that God was going to heal Susan and that she was not going to have the stents. God was going to remove the plaque and she was going to be just fine. I can still hear Allison and the exasperation in her voice, and I knew she had thought I had totally lost my mind. But she does love me. She tried to explain to me that when you have blockages, you have to have stents. I tried to explain to her that God was going to take away the blockage. The surgery was scheduled for an hour away. After the phone call, I waited and I waited. Then the call came in about an hour and a half later. I heard Allison's smile, I sensed it before I heard her giggle as she told me that they had to cancel the surgery because they could not find any plaque. They discharged Susan and sent her home. God is faithful, so faithful. He is my hero. I love the way he loves us in the most amazing ways. He is still in the miracle-making business. I see it all the time. I recognize him more and more in every little thing. I'll come back and we'll start chapter 5. Chapter 4 was fairly long, but it was the one that I had copied and pasted out of my book called The Shift. Chapter 5 would be one that I wrote recently. I'll be right back.